Section 29. From the first conversation to the keys. Completing the Arizona buyer journey. Several months have passed since Ashley received the keys to her Gilbert home. One afternoon, she stops by Daniel's office. There isn't a problem this time. No roof leak, no lender question, no inspection report, no appraisal issue. She's simply there to say thank you. Michael happens to be walking through the office when he sees her. "How's homeownership?" he asks. Ashley laughs. "Expensive." Everyone laughs because that may be the most honest answer we've heard all day. Then Ashley looks at Daniel. "Do you remember the first time I called you?" Daniel does. At the beginning of this course, Ashley believed buying a home meant finding something online, touring it, writing an offer, signing some papers, and getting the keys. She had no idea how much would happen between those moments. Neither do many buyers. And that's exactly why competent buyer representation matters. Ashley had to understand her finances before she could intelligently shop for property. She learned that loan qualification isn't something that happens once and then becomes permanent. Employment, credit, debt, assets, documentation, and financial decisions can continue to matter throughout the transaction. She learned that the prettiest house isn't necessarily the right property. A buyer isn't simply purchasing bedrooms, bathrooms, countertops, and a backyard. The buyer may also be acquiring HOA obligations, easements, restrictions, property condition issues, maintenance responsibilities, title matters, and financial commitments that can continue for years. She learned that a purchase offer isn't just a price. Price, earnest money, financing, closing date, seller contributions, contingencies, possession, personal property, addenda, and other terms work together to create the proposed transaction. She learned that negotiation doesn't mean winning every point. Sometimes the seller says yes. Sometimes the seller says no. Sometimes the answer is a counteroffer. The agent's job is to help the buyer understand the choices and consequences, not make the decision for the buyer. Ashley learned what earnest money means and why deadlines matter. She learned that escrow is more than a place where money disappears until closing. She learned that wire fraud can destroy a transaction in minutes, and that financial instructions must be independently verified. Then came title. Ashley learned that owning property means understanding more than the structure sitting on the land. Easements, CC&Rs, liens, assessments, and other recorded matters can affect ownership and use. Then came one of the most important subjects in this entire course, disclosure. Ashley learned that the SPDS is valuable, but it is not a warranty. She learned that a seller's answer of unknown doesn't necessarily mean something improper occurred. She learned that previous repairs deserve questions. She learned that disclosures can identify issues requiring additional investigation. Most importantly, she learned that disclosure and due diligence work together. Michael turns toward Daniel. "What did you tell Ashley when she wanted you to tell her whether everything on the SPDS was okay?" Daniel smiles. "I told her we investigate what matters." Exactly. A good buyer's agent doesn't simply hand the buyer a stack of documents and say, "Sign here." The agent helps the buyer recognize why those documents matter. Then Tom entered the story. The inspection reminded Ashley that no home is perfect. It also reminded Daniel that attending hundreds of inspections doesn't make a real estate agent, an electrician, plumber, roofer, structural engineer, HVAC contractor, pest professional, or environmental expert. Know your role, know your limits, bring in the right professionals. The Binzer gave Ashley another decision. Daniel didn't turn the inspection report into his own repair list. He helped Ashley determine what mattered to her. Then the appraisal came in low. Once again, Daniel didn't panic. He didn't attack the appraiser. He didn't guarantee the seller would reduce the price. He brought Rachel back into the conversation, reviewed the contractual process, communicated with the listing side, and helped Ashley evaluate her options. The transaction continued. Closing costs arrived. Underwriting continued. The final walkthrough produced one more surprise. Documents were signed. The lender funded. The deed recorded. Possession occurred according to the contract. And finally, Daniel handed Ashley the keys. Michael looks around the room and says something every Arizona licensee should remember. The keys were the result. The representation was everything that happened before the keys. That is this course. Representing the Arizona buyer. The entire journey isn't really about showing homes. It's about protecting the public. It's about helping consumers understand transactions they may participate in only a few times during their lives. It's about recognizing that information matters. It's about understanding that silence can matter too. It's about knowing when something needs to be disclosed, when something needs to be investigated, and when you need to stop guessing and call your broker. Throughout Ashley's journey, Michael gave Daniel 4 words: document, verify, disclose, communicate. If you remember nothing else from this course, remember those 4 words. Document. Your file should tell the story of the transaction. Preserve required contracts, disclosures, notices, instructions, and communications according to Arizona law and brokerage policy. Verify. Don't turn assumptions into facts. MLS information, seller statements, neighborhood conversations, old listings, and internet searches may identify questions, but important information affecting the buyer's decision may require confirmation through appropriate, reliable sources. Disclose. Material information doesn't become less important because disclosure might threaten the transaction. AAC R4-28-1101 establishes important duties for Arizona licensees. Your obligation to protect your client's interests does not authorize dishonesty or concealment. Communicate. Information has little value when it reaches the client after the deadline has passed. Communicate early enough for the buyer to make an informed decision. And I want to add one final word. Ask. Ask questions. Ask the lender. Ask escrow. Ask title. Ask the inspector. Ask the appropriate specialist. Ask your broker. There is nothing professional about pretending to know an answer you don't know. The strongest agents aren't the agents who never need help. They're the agents who recognize when help is needed before the problem gets bigger. Ashley turns to Daniel before leaving. I have a friend who's thinking about buying a house. What should I tell her? Daniel smiles. He thinks about financing, buyer representation, property selection, offers, disclosures, inspections, title, appraisal, underwriting, closing, and everything Ashley experienced. Then he gives her the simplest answer of the entire course. Tell her to ask questions. Ashley laughs. A lot of questions? Daniel nods. A lot of questions. And that is exactly what we want from an informed Arizona buyer. Our responsibility isn't to make buyers afraid of real estate. Our responsibility is to help them understand it. Don't rush them through disclosures. Don't minimize problems because you're afraid of losing the transaction. Don't substitute your judgment for the buyer's. Don't allow a commission to become more important than your client's informed decision. And never forget why the Arizona Department of Real Estate regulates our profession: protection of the public. When you represent your next Arizona buyer, remember Ashley. From the first conversation, to the first showing, to the offer, to disclosure, to inspection, to appraisal, to closing, to the moment you finally place those keys in your client's hand. Be the professional who helps the buyer understand the entire journey. Because excellent buyer representation isn't measured only by whether the transaction closes. It's measured by whether the buyer was informed, protected, represented, and able to make knowledgeable decisions along the way. Michael closes Ashley's transaction file and places it back on the shelf. Daniel looks at the next appointment on his calendar. New buyer consultation, 2 p.m. He smiles. Another journey is about to begin. Course closing remarks. Congratulations, you have completed representing the Arizona buyer the entire journey. As you return to your real estate practice, remember that every buyer will be different, every property will be different, and every transaction will present its own challenges. Contracts and forms change, lending programs change, markets change, technology changes. Your professional responsibilities remain. Protect the client, protect the public. Know the contract, investigate what matters, make required disclosures, document the transaction, communicate clearly. Know your professional limits. And when you're uncertain, involve your broker and the appropriate professional. Do those things consistently, and you won't simply become better at closing transactions. You'll become better at representing people. And that is the standard Arizona buyers deserve. Online discussion 1. Looking back at Ashley's entire transaction, what was Daniel's most important responsibility as her buyer's agent? Daniel's most important responsibility was helping Ashley make informed real estate decisions while protecting and promoting her interests within Arizona law and the transaction documents. He coordinated information, explained the process, monitored deadlines, encouraged appropriate investigations, communicated material information, documented important events, and recognized when other qualified professionals were needed. His role was not to make every decision for Ashley, but to help Ashley make knowledgeable decisions for herself. 2. Why are document, verify, disclose, communicate useful principles throughout the entire buyer journey? These principles address many of the risks that repeatedly appear in buyer representation. Documentation creates a reliable transaction history. Verification reduces reliance on assumptions. Disclosure helps ensure material information reaches the buyer when required. Communication allows the buyer and other transaction participants to respond while there is still time to act. Together, these practices support informed decision-making and protection of the public. What should an Arizona real estate licensee do when a transaction question exceeds the licensee's knowledge or professional expertise? Answer: the licensee should avoid guessing or presenting an unsupported opinion as fact. The agent should identify the appropriate reliable source or qualified professional, help the buyer obtain additional information, and involve the managing or designated broker when appropriate. Recognizing professional limitations is an important part of competent representation.